to the Rest Podcast. We're excited today to talk about therapy. So Jervy and I, we're going to get into this great conversation. And in order to do so on the Rest Podcast, we always want to first start with our check-in. And we just want to talk to one another and just see how we're doing mentally, emotionally, physically, in all areas of life. So I'll start with you, hand it over. Jervy, how you doing? Let's check in.
Man. Well, one thing I had to do is I had to clean up my communication with myself. And
Clean
yeah,
up
I know, that sounds crazy, right?
communication with yourself.
Yeah, that's a Jervy-ism.
Okay.
Basically, a lot of times when I would say, like on Sabbathing or I'm taking a day off, that did not necessarily mean rest, and it should, because that's the purpose of it. And so now I communicate more honestly with myself. You know, is that going to be a day of rest? What does rest look like on that day? You know, don't kid yourself just because you took a day off that you're celebrating like, oh, I'm in good life rhythms because I always take this day off, when you know that you're not resting on those days. And so cleaning up my communication with myself, being honest with yourself is very, very important.
So you're using the phrase cleaning up your communication with yourself as a way to say being honest with yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because we tell ourselves a lot of things, and we celebrate things that we shouldn't be celebrating if we're being honest.
What did you have to be honest with yourself about?
About my tendency to not be honest with myself. My tendency to just overlook certain things and make excuses for myself. Like an example could be that, that I would just say, well, yeah, I am, taking days off, or I am managing my time well. And the truth is that when you look at that, you realize that you're really not. You realize that you are taking, way too much work home. You realize that, sometimes you're entirely too accessible to people, because there are times that, for your own mental and emotional and spiritual health and the health and wellness of your family, you need to take time, with those people, and you need to slow down. And sometimes we tell ourselves like we can handle it. It's okay this time.
Yeah.
I'm only going to answer the call this time. I'm only going to go out and do this thing this time. And then you find yourself in a rhythm, for weeks that you've been doing the same thing because you wasn't honest with yourself.
Right.
And so being honest with yourself, saying, yes, I have a tendency to be too accessible. I have a tendency to, to enjoy being helpful, when I should be resting. I have these are tendencies that I have, and I have to be honest with that.
And those are all good things that you're
doing. They
are
good things. It's great that you enjoy being helpful, but I think it's also important for you to realize that you cannot give what you don't have. So eventually, when you're depleted, guess what's going to happen? You won't have anything to give, and instead of being helpful, you're going to need help.
Yeah.
And so being honest with yourself on the front end, it kind of it helps with that a great deal.
I think a lot of us would struggle, with that last phrase, because a lot of things that we may do in life may be helpful and may be giving to others, and not even recognizing how draining it can be in our own personal lives at the same time. And I think when that happens, we feel conflicted and we feel guilty about pulling ourselves back, even though we know that might be a helpful thing in our own life. So do you experience some of that same reality when you try to pull back a little bit for the sake of your own self-care?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, especially having spent time in the military and just valuing what it is to have a good work ethic and being a hard worker, and all of these things that we value that are good things to value. You want to be a hard worker, you want to have a good work ethic, all that, but and then feeling guilty. Like not realizing that when you're resting, sometimes you feel like you're not doing anything. But the truth is that you are doing something. No different than when your phone is charging. It's doing something. You say, well, my phone's not doing anything. Yes, it is. It's doing something. It's charging.
That's good.
So I think that, you're absolutely right. I know what that guilt feels like when you're sitting there resting, and it's really hard for you to rest because your mind's like, man, I got all these things to do, and I got all these things to do. And the truth is that if you go do all of those things, that still's not going to solve the problem. You know why? because you're going to have still more things to do. It's never ending. So you got to get to a point where you say, you know what, there's always going to be something to do. But right now, I'm doing the most important thing that I need to do. And that's rest so that I can prepare myself, prepare my body, prepare my mind, spend time with my family, which prepares my family for the times that I have to be away and do the things that I need to do.
It's good.
Yeah. So what about you, my brother? How are things these days?
Yeah. So we're doing our check-in, right? And so if I was to answer the question of how am I doing mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually,
yes.
How am I doing?
Yes.
I'm making progress. I think that's the phrase that I would use right now, making progress. I think about many times in my life when I think about how am I doing, it seems to always relate in the context of what amount of time do I actually spend physically exercising, because exercise to me is probably one of the margins of my life.
Okay.
And when I actually spend time exercising, it means that I feel a little bit more at peace. There's less anxiety. I feel less busy and rushed because I give myself an opportunity to do something that is needful for myself and that I enjoy.
I think that's really interesting, and I would love for you to speak more to that, because I think sometimes people think of exercise as just like, okay, so we're checking in, how are you doing physically? The exercise would fit into your answer about how you're doing physically. But the things that you just described were emotional, were spiritual. You get what I'm saying? Were mental. So I think I would love to hear you speak a bit more about how exercise impacts other areas of your life. So not just the physical aspect of the benefit that you get from exercising, but the fact that how it impacts all those other areas as well.
Yeah, I think and I think I want to answer the question first by first stating that when I think about exercise for my own self, if I am too anxious in life, if I'm worrying about too many things, if I'm too busy, then I won't exercise. So it's a first indication and a sign from my own personal life.
Wow.
Because I'm caught up in so much of the other things that are going on that's the last thing that I'm going to take care of. And that's in general. So
your refusal to exercise is communicating to you that you're entirely too busy.
Entirely too busy.
I love that.
Yeah. And I think that's an indication for most of things in my life is that when I'm too busy, I'll refuse to take care of myself.
Wow.
Because I just want to get things accomplished and get things done.
Yeah.
And so the last thing that I'll do is actually think about, well, how am I in the process? Which is helpful to hear you say earlier that if we look at our own self and we care for our own self, it helps us to actually be more productive, more effective, and to do more and to be better in everything in life.
Yeah.
But I personally do the opposite, when I can recognize when I'm actually trying to get more accomplished that I actually won't take care of myself. So when I talk about like how am I doing right now, I think that I'm in a progress stage of being able to make sure that I'm actually taking care of myself well. And at first for me, at this stage is thinking about like this area of exercise. And so I'm about 5 to 6 weeks in of running every single week, at least 3 days or 4 days a week. And so I'm really happy, about that opportunity right now. And I tell you what, haven't been in that kind of exercise rhythm in such a while. First day that I tried to do it, it wasn't a good day. Wasn't a good day to say the least. And so went out there, and I needed to actually just pray just to get through it. Pray to get through it. Wasn't breathing well, wasn't moving well, wasn't running at a good pace. When I got finished, I was exhausted. I was sore. Had all this stuff, but at the same time, I had a strong sense of joy.
Yeah.
It was such a satisfying experience in the midst of the difficulty because I knew that I was moving in the right direction. I knew that it was something that was really healthy for me. And so I would say that I've gotten better, breathing a little bit better, moving a little bit more, lost a couple pounds. All those things are benefit. But most importantly, I feel a lot of joy, in the midst of it. And because I think that's where I want to get to with the conversation of rest. Because the exercise for me, like during the difficulties of just simply trying to exercise, most of it had to do with prayer.
Right.
Praying just to actually get through is where I found actually a lot of joy.
Right.
Recognizing that I was asking the Lord for his help.
Right.
In those moments, in those seasons. And that's where I really get into this conversation of rest. Rest is for me a consistent place of calling on God in a sense of need and trusting through the process.
Right.
And so I feel really good about that. And so in addition to that,
that's great.
If I think about, what else I'm going through right now, I've been doing something that is new for me as well. I've been doing some breathing exercises. And as I've learned some more about these breathing exercises, one of the things that I did was just like listen to people talk about the importance of breathing and the impact that it actually has on your life. And I was taken back a little bit by a man stating that, he's an executive life coach. And he'll go into these large corporations, and the very first thing that he actually does is actually teach them to breathe.
Wow.
Of all the things that you would think that you would do with coaching in a business setting, the last thing that I would think about is breathing. And he said that one of the reasons that he starts with breathing is that he recognizes that people who are too busy, that are overworked, they don't give themselves enough time to process the loss and the hurt that is actually in their life. And he said breathing is a way to actually release some of those things. And I think that also has to do with this conversation of rest. Making sure that we learn and understand that rest is a way to actually process life.
Yes.
It's a way to process the things that we're actually going through. And so I've been breathing, and it does some beautiful things of being able to help your mind to think through what you're going through and to reflect on what's important in life.
Yeah, I think taking the time to be aware of your breathing forces you to be present in the moment. And a lot of times that's what we don't want to be, right? Because our mind is racing to the next task, the next thing that needs to be done. So we're either living too heavily into the future or too heavily in the past. But when you slow down and you manage your breathing, I could see that would have a tremendous impact, in that moment, because there are many people that don't, it's just something that we do, right? Just like, to slow down and go outside and watch a sunset or a sunrise or watch a bird or, watch the ants build an ant nest. These are things that, to slow down and literally be aware of in the moment, being present in the moment. I think there's so much power in that.
Yeah.
In learning how to be present with yourself, I think those breathing exercises would also spill into how we're present with one another.
Yeah.
And ultimately spill into how we're present with God. I think that just being able to slow down and be present is a skill that not many. It's interesting that there's someone coaching, and teaching this, because I don't know if this is a skill that many of us learn any place at any time in our lives.
Yeah, and I think I actually have a good friend that's a physical coach, like an athletic coach.
Yeah.
And he says the same exact thing. Like when he's training athletes, he says the very first thing that he's got to do is actually teach people how to breathe.
The same with a friend of mine who does vocal training.
Right.
Same thing. So you think just because a person can sing, they can sing, but you don't know their capabilities if they learn how to breathe.
Right.
It adds a whole new value to singing, to engaging, whatever it is that they're doing. So, yeah, I could see great value in that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so we probably should even talk about what does it mean to breathe and what are these exercises. And so what I've learned about breathing is, a lot of people will try to breathe up, but it's more like an expansion out like from the chest area, and then holding that as long as you can and then exhaling it out. and just doing that exercise, repeatedly, allowing yourself to calm, to be at peace, to relax. For me, it's a place where, I can be present with myself, and most importantly, I can be present, with some of the thoughts that I think that God is actually sharing with me, at moments.
How about let's do that right now. Let's just
Okay.
Could you lead us in that for a moment?
I'm a novice.
Okay, it's all right. It's all right. This will be good.
But for what I know is that you're kind of starting, with, if you want to start so you can feel what it actually looks like, you want to put your hands on your ribs.
Right.
And as you breathe in, you kind of want to feel the chest and the mid area, the diaphragm kind of expand out. That's a short one, but you continue that process, and you can do that for about 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Start your day like that.
Yeah.
Relax in the day.
Right.
Or go out throughout the whole day. When you need it.
Right.
Kind of just
I
breathe.
think that's something great to put in, our daily rhythms. Maybe take a time where you are, pausing in your day to kind of enjoy that and be present, with yourself, and kind of put the list aside, put the things aside that you're working on, and just be present in the moment.
And there's multiple ways that I do it. I even after I exercise, one of the things that I've been doing is actually soaking in Epsom salt, just as part of the recovery process.
Okay.
And while I'm soaking in the Epsom salt, I'm using that as a time to breathe, as well while I'm there. And as I'm breathing, it's also time for me to worship, a time for me to listen to the Word of God, and I'm taking those things on in the meditative state. And so there's many different ways you can actually begin to process that in life.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I think it's really important, to pause and be reflective of your own self and think about, really, how am I doing mentally?
Yeah.
How am I doing physically? How am I doing spiritually? How am I doing emotionally? And having good people around you to kind of talk about that. So that's the reason for the check-in. That's our goal with the check-in, to not only have the conversation with one another, which is so beneficial,
right,
but to invite other people to have the conversation too.
And I would say also to hold one another accountable. I mean, because you and I talk even outside of this, and there are times that you'll ask me questions like, how's that going? And I'm like, oh, snap. Man, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I do need to pay more attention to that. Or I have something to celebrate. Like, bro, listen, that thing I was telling you about, that's going great. And, I am, doing that thing or following up with whatever that is. So I think accountability is a huge piece of it as well.
All right.
Great.
Hey, everybody. This is the cultural segment of the Rest Podcast, where we try to give practical ways in which you can rest. And one of the ways I want to encourage us all to rest is through memory labs. Memory labs is an innovative way to preserve our memories, to preserve culture, and then to be able to share that with others through archiving keepsakes, memorabilia, things that are important, and then preserving them. Even in libraries today, you can take your memorabilia, such as photos, things that you have, tangible things, and then digitize them as a way to preserve them forever so that you can share them with future generations. I've brought some items here as examples of things that we can keep. Even in the Bible, we know that God directed certain prophets to build altars. A lot of these altars were built out of rocks. And here's a literal rock that has faith written on it as a memory of a time where faith was important, and it just was a helpful reminder. And so you can keep those things in your memorabilia. Even also, when God helped you to graduate to a new level of success or to a new level of anything, those are things that are important to keep and to preserve, to pass on to future generations, and to keep in your box whenever you may be feeling discouraged. Journaling is important. I've had a journal since I was in the 2nd grade. I have 20 or 30 of these at home, and it's a great way to actually time travel to go back in time and see what was going on in my mind and what I was worried about at that time and things that I'm not worried about anymore, and to compare. And this box is just representing to preserve these things well. Keep them in a way that they won't be damaged, that nothing can harm those things, so that you can also share them with others and they can see. And it's a great way to encourage yourself at any time and to encourage future generations. Memory labs. I encourage you to do that and hope that you're blessed by it in your times of rest.
Let's go hip hop.
Let's do it.
Let's go hip hop and get into this conversation of therapy. So I want to hit you with this line, and I want to see if you know who it is. It's going to lead us into the conversation today about therapy.
Okay.
Here's the line. Here's the bar. I went and got me a therapist so I can debate all my theories and share it. A place to consolidate all my comparisons. Do you know who that is?
I do not know who that is. I could think of the song because it seems like it's leading me into a greater depth of a conversation. So I'd like to know what that song is.
I'm gonna quote it one more time, give it the title of the song and the artist this time. I went and got me a therapist so I can debate all my theories and share it. A place to consolidate all my comparisons. The song is United in Grief, Kendrick Lamar.
Wow. Okay.
United in Grief,
Love it.
Kendrick Lamar.
Yep, that sounds like Kendrick.
Sounds like Kendrick.
Yep.
Tell me, what do you mean by that?
I mean, Kendrick is I would say for those of us that are like kind of hip hop purists, Kendrick being like I'm going to say not just Kendrick, but his draft class, if I can put it that way.
Okay.
With J. Cole and, a few others. They really excited a lot of the hip hop purists because these guys are conscious. I mean, they're deep thinkers. And lyrically, when you listen to their music, the music can be really good.
But they got something to say.
But the artistry and what they're doing inside of the music is intriguing. So Kendrick is a person that, mostly I'm not saying he doesn't have songs that you would like bump in your car, but Kendrick has songs that you would sit down, at the coffee shop and listen to.
He's a fascinating artist.
Yeah, he's fascinating.
Yeah.
His mind is fascinating, his reach. He's very intelligent. And so he brings a lot, to the conversation. I'm going to say in most anything that I've heard from Kendrick.
Yeah, he's a fascinating artist because he's not solely, he's a popular artist, but he's not solely a pop artist.
I like that.
You're
right.
He's an artist that is artist in every sense of the word.
Yep.
He's very capable of being able to think.
Yeah.
Very capable of being able to express the thoughts of a community. Very able to express the thoughts of a culture. And so let's get a little bit deeper into this song, United in Grief, in the lyrics, and gets us into the conversation of an important aspect of life that he's actually sharing with. He says, I went and got me a therapist so I can debate on my theories and share it, a place to consolidate all my comparisons. So is this art? Is this his life? Does it relate to any of us? It's a good question. Let's talk about this. So I got myself a therapist. What do you think about that line, and what do you think about therapy? Therapy right now is a popular conversation in the lives of many people.
Yeah.
Popular, and so that maybe 10 years ago, we weren't having this same conversation about therapy so openly and embraced in such a significant way. So what do we think about Kendrick Lamar saying, I went and got me a therapist?
Yeah, well, it speaks to the intentionality of what it takes to have a therapist. I know that sounds, obvious, but I think it really is an important point because, he went and got him a therapist means that first you have to see your need for a therapist. It's not like I found me a therapist or, a therapist came to me. I think when it comes to mental health, sometimes having an awareness of where we are and what it is that we're going through and the help that we need is what leads us to go do the thing that we need to do. But if we're not willing to address those needs, and there's various reasons why, especially I could say, in our culture, why we don't do that. But the point is that the intentionality of saying, hey, I went and got a therapist, and this is the reason that I went and got the therapist, because I know that I needed a space where I can take all these comparisons, all this stuff that's happening in my brain, and actually process it. Because it's not something that I can just do on my own,
And I think that's a huge part
Yeah.
of the conversation of therapy,
Yeah.
is recognizing that if I read this line so I can debate on my theories and share it, a place to consolidate all my comparisons. How many of us have people in our life that we can truly talk to?
Ha.
How many people that we have in our life that we can truly express the things that are on our mind, the things that are in our heart, the things that we worry about, the things that we're burdened about?
Yeah.
And so therapy is a conversation to think about, not only a place that we're processing things in life, but I also think it speaks to a bigger aspect of what does it mean to have good community in our life,
Right.
where you have good friends, you have good family, you have a good church.
Yeah.
You have good people in your life where you're really able to talk about the things that are heavy on your heart.
Hey, that's what it's about. I mean, because I'm going to say two things about that. First thing, it's important for us to have that. And the second thing is it's important for us to be that. Someone in your family and mine has to have the courage to step up and be that person if we're in a family where there isn't that person.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes, in our family dynamic, we're like, in my family, we're like this. We can
Right.
say that, right? But when you say things like that, are you also admitting that there are things that should be present in your family that isn't? That there isn't a person that makes people feel comfortable in their own skin? There isn't a person that says it's okay for you to have this conversation with me. It's okay for you to be confused. It's okay for you to not have the answer. It's okay for you to have those comparisons, those things.
Right.
Well, if we don't have that in our family, why aren't we being that for our family? Because that becomes the thing too. A lot of times we sit around and complain about what is or isn't present in our family, but then we refuse sometimes to take up the mantle that's being offered to us.
Yeah.
In relation to now you see this thing that isn't present, that you're willing to take up the mantle and be that person. So maybe you need to be the first person, to say, hey, I go to therapy. This is how I'm caring for myself.
Yeah. And in fairness to families, I would
Yeah.
like to put this in the conversation
Okay.
that therapists are trained individuals who have learned how to listen,
Correct.
trained individuals who have learned how to help people to process their thoughts,
Correct.
trained individuals who are people who have learned how to help people to dig deeper and think about the emotions and the pain that they actually have in their life.
That's correct.
So when we think about family, family or friends, and sometimes even people in church, are not trained in that level to help people to dig deeper and to process the things that are going on in life.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm more so speaking to is that sometimes we don't have the courage to go seek that help until we have someone with us that can say that it's okay for you to do that. The judgment that happens in a lot of our families is what keeps us from doing a lot of things that we need to do for ourselves. So we can say in our family, people in my family, they don't get help like that. But then people in your family that need help. What I'm saying is you could be the person to go to that person and say, look, man, or cuz, man, I know you've been saying that you need to talk to somebody. Maybe this is something we could do together, man, because I need to talk to somebody too. Or look, man, just between you and me, I go to therapy. And it's helped me out tremendously. Like having the courage to step up and say, I'm not going to continue to say that my family does not have this or my family is not like this when I know that there are things that people in my family are suffering with and going through. And I know that there are things that I'm suffering with and going through. So I got to have the courage to do the things that I need to do for myself and my family, and then bring that in a broader scale, to other people in my family that need that. Yeah. We need more courage.
That's courageous.
In this conversation.
Yeah. Because as I grew up, one of the things that you didn't talk about were your feelings. You didn't talk about the things that made you hurt.
That's right.
The things that you were ashamed of.
Yeah.
You didn't talk about the things that actually gave you pain. Instead, you either bottled that up. I'm talking personally. I bottled it up. Yeah. Or I learned to find outlets to release it. And outlets to release it, could be, exercise, whatever that is. You just find a different way to express it, but to be vulnerable enough to say that I'm hurting, wasn't something that was accepted.
Right.
It was more taboo.
Right.
So I do appreciate the conversation right now where people are saying, hey, I went and I got me a therapist.
Yep.
Because it's breaking a whole nother level boundary of from where I grew up, that wasn't an accepted statement, in any way, shape, form, or fashion.
I'm totally with you on that. This past week, we were in Orlando, and I had to speak at a particular session. And I was sharing, during that session, my own personal situation, with therapy. And so I was going through one of the most difficult times in my life. And, I went and got a therapist, right? And it was very, very difficult for me to do that. And I'll never forget this therapist. She was phenomenal. She was kind of stayed with me, let me, every week come and just dump all the stuff on the table. And I remember just crying immensely, man, during this time. So I'm expressing this, during my talk, and about how much I cried, and and how at the end of this session, a particular session, I was looking for a tissue box, because every time I go in there, I was going through so much pain internally. Like, I didn't want to be here anymore. I was going through that much pain.
Yeah.
And every time I'm using up her tissue, crying. And at this particular session, I get up and I'm looking for a tissue box. And I couldn't find the tissue box. And so she asked me, she said, what are you looking for? I said, I'm looking for a tissue. And I'm like wiping on my sleeve, because I dehydrate. When I cry like that, I'm dehydrating, right? I'm just sitting there like, becoming a California raisin, just. And she said,
haven't heard that in a while.
Yeah, so she told me, she said, you will find no more tissue here. And she was a Christian, and she quoted Ecclesiastes chapter 3 to me. It had, basically, there's a time and a place. So basically, your time of grieving this situation is over. And she gave me this, through so many things that she said to me after that, gave me the courage to really stand up and just know that I needed that season of grieving. And now, I can stand up and move forward with my life. It was such a powerful moment. The fact, intentionally, she hid the tissue boxes. And after that, there was no more I couldn't find the tissue anyplace. Sometimes, even if I wasn't crying, I'd go talk to her and I'd be like, where the tissue box? She said, I knew you were coming, so she would hide them. The point that I'm making is that I shared this story, and a young lady came up to me afterward, and that wasn't even the topic, right? I'm talking about other things, but I just happened to put in this personal experience. And she had tears in her eyes, and she told me, she said, that out of everything that I said, she said the fact that I shared with her my challenges, with depression and, all of that, it just really impacted her deeply, because, whenever leaders share these sorts of things with her, which is rare, she says it causes her to realize that, that she's not the only one, that it is possible for her to actually fulfill, her dreams, and actually, become, who she feels God is leading her to be in her life, and still struggle with these things, that's a very real thing. That she because sometimes she struggles with the fact that I'll never be that thing that I most feel that God is created me for and leading me to be, because I'm so broken.
Okay.
And because, I'm just so broken. But when she sees that other people can come out and say, you know what, I may be here, but I'm broken too.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
Right.
And God's grace is sufficient, and we can get help,
Right.
with our brokenness, and all of that is a part of your journey and a part of your story.
Wow.
And she encouraged me so much. I thought I was there to encourage them.
Right.
I walked away so encouraged because I struggle with telling certain aspects of my story. There's so much that I've been through, so much that, my wife has been through, so much that our family's been through. And because of coming from where we come from, what we were just talking about, I struggle with telling that story, because until I hear people like her that find value in it, and then it causes me to realize that, I believe I'm in a season where I feel like I need to be more transparent with those things, because it does help people. We all have stories, we all have journeys, we all have brokenness, we all have struggles. And you know what? God's grace is sufficient, and we can all just help one another gain the courage, because sometimes it's not just you. Sometimes I may gain courage from something that you said. We can help one another in that aspect, so that we can get the help that we need. That's a very important thing.
Yeah. I was wondering how we were going to describe rest in the midst of this conversation. And so when I think about rest itself, rest, pretty much starts with recognizing that there's a need in your life from God, and that you can learn to come to Him and trust and rest in Him.
Yeah.
And so when we think about like therapy itself, therapy is a place where you're always talking about your brokenness. Mm-hmm. You're always talking about your need. You're always, using that expression that the young lady shared with you, is that she felt that she was in a place where she couldn't utilize and be who she was called to be because she was so broken.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the part of therapy that is scary for a lot of people, because you get to a place where you have to acknowledge, where you are weak, where you have pain, where you have difficulty. And if you're not ready to be honest with yourself, how can you ever come to God and actually receive help from Him, in that place of need, in that place of grace that He actually shares with us. And that's ultimately what the gospel is. The gospel tells us that we come to God because we are needy.
Right.
Because we have a need that we can't solve ourselves, that only He can actually solve.
Right. This reminds me of a story that I heard one time about a guy who is a little crazy story, but anyway, there's a guy, he's walking down this trail, and he has these water pots. So he fills up these 2 water pots every day, and he walks down this trail, and he takes these water pots to where he needs them. Well, one of the pots has a hole in it, and the other one doesn't. But these pots can talk, right? So allow me that in the story.
Water
right?
pots can talk.
Yeah. So the one water pot, one day, expresses to the gentleman that he really feels that he is like not as good as the other pot, and he starts really feeling like expressing to the gentleman that maybe he should destroy him because he's no good. He's always dropping water everywhere, and he tries not to drop water, but he can't help it. And so he's just talking to the gentleman about how he wishes he was like the other pot. He wishes he was whole, so he wouldn't spill so much water all the time. And so the gentleman, the very next day, took the pot, and as he walked down the path, he flipped you know, because the picture is that these pots are on this long staff, right?
Yeah.
So he flipped it the other way and flipped it the other way because he wanted the pot to see both sides of the path. And every time he would turn the pot a certain way, the pot would then see all of these beautiful flowers. And so what the gentleman told him at the end of the path, and I'm not telling this story so well, but what the gentleman told him at the end of the path is that I knew that you had a hole, and that's the reason that I put you on the side that I carried you, because I have all of these beautiful plants that I needed
to be
water.
watered.
Yes. And so the thing is that when we don't see things from that perspective, we look at our inadequacies and, you know, our pain and our brokenness as like a handicap to God, when that's not possible, because God can use all of it. Every single bit of it he can use. Every bit, every broken piece, every hole in the pot, every single thing. God knows how he made us, and God knows how we are. And none of it is a handicap to him because he's sovereign over all things. He is able to use all of that for his glory. And so sometimes we're those broken pots, and we just look at ourselves and we say, well, we're not. That's the comparisons that I hear in that lyric. He was saying a place where he could put all of his comparisons, because we're those pots that's always comparing ourselves to other pots. We don't know what the master has in store for that pot, just like we don't know what the master is doing with this broken pot. Why not just trust the master? That's rest. Rest is, I just trust that the master knows what he's doing, because he knows me. So I can rest in my confidence that he's going to make everything okay, whether I look like that pot or not.
Good.
I can just be who I am and in the master's hands, right? I can rest there knowing that I can fulfill whatever plan and purpose he has for me, not because of who I am, but because of who he is. That's rest.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Where do you want to go next? I got another lyric if you want me to go.
Come with it.
You sure?
Yeah.
Or do you want to go?
All right, well, I can go now.
Okay.
All right.
Let's touch this.
Because I'm gonna hit you with this. This right here. This is real hip hop too.
I don't know. No.
Let me hit you with this.
Are you sure? Where you want me to go?
Well, let me show you. I'm gonna give you the intro. I'm actually gonna read the intro, and then I'm gonna read like a little bit.
So what you want me to do with when you present this? What you want me to do with it?
I want you to tell me the song and the artist.
The song and the artist.
Yes.
Okay.
Brothers and sisters, I want to welcome you back to life, back to the one who could make your next chapter your best chapter. How can it be that you love the most unlovable part of me? How could you see your life was the only gift I'll ever need to be free? It's amazing with you. I win even if I lose. Everything's working out for good, for always.
I don't know. I don't know what that is.
All right, I'm going to read it one more time. Brothers and sisters, I want to welcome you back to life, back to the one who can make your next chapter your best chapter. How can it be that you love the most unlovable part of me? How could you see
I know that
your
line.
life was the only gift I'll ever need to be free? It's amazing with you. I win even if I lose. Everything's working out for my good for always. Kirk Franklin, Love Theory.
Oh, wow. Okay. I wouldn't have thought that was that's interesting.
Okay. If we want to talk hip hop, that's Kirk Franklin is hip hop. Yeah. Come on, you gotta give it up. Gotta give it up. That's what he was always criticized for.
I don't know.
You know, when he
hip-hop.
brought, I believe he's as hip hop as hip hop. I just do.
He's a great gospel artist.
Well,
and he's a great artist. You know, I would say both those things unequivocally about Kirk Franklin. I think he's a great artist. He's a great gospel artist. I wouldn't put Kirk Franklin in the category of hip hop?
I would.
Okay.
I would put Kirk Franklin in the category of hip hop because of the influences to his music that are so expressed. If anything, there's a fusion that takes place, and that the foundation of it is probably more hip hop. The content of it may be gospel.
Yeah.
But the foundation of it is hip hop.
Well, I will say this, that I've seen hip hop producers listen to beats done by Kirk Franklin and go crazy. Mm-hmm. I've definitely seen that. So I can relate to some of the things that you're saying.
Yeah.
I think that his foundation, is definitely hip hop.
I look at Kirk Franklin as like a Corvette, right? The early Corvettes, the C1, C2s, they actually were Cadillacs. A lot of people don't know that, right? Because when you think about a Corvette, you think like a sports car. Mm-hmm. But it started off as a luxury car that actually became a sports car, and then the company began to focus more on the sport than the luxury. Mm-hmm. But it began somewhere, the platform for it, right? But the engine of it is hip hop. That's the actual. Well, I'm going to say it the opposite. The platform of it is hip hop. The engine of it is gospel. I believe he's very serious about it, the gospel message that's inside of his music.
I think he's very serious about it.
But I think the platform is always hip hop.
Yeah.
And that's the reason you feel, with Stomp and some of the other ones. If you watch Love Theory, you watch the video, I mean, you feel like it's almost like a hip hop video. Because that's what he brings to the table, because he is as influenced by hip hop as we are.
I don't know if he's, well, okay, yeah.
I mean, if you hear him talk about it.
I could definitely say that he's as influenced, but I'm not putting Kirk Franklin in the same levels and categories of even quality of hip hop in my personal experience.
Okay.
I think that his foundation is definitely hip hop.
Okay.
And I think that his foundation of some of the beats that producers can actually love, but once you start to add in the whole experience and compare it to hip hop, I don't think that it competes very highly.
Well, I wouldn't look at it as something that would compete. I'm more so talking about the foundations of it. Kind of in a way, I mean, if you were to say, like, is James Brown hip hop? James Brown to me is hip hop.
Yeah. James Brown's definitely hip hop. I mean, that's
so,
without question.
So to me, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Same conversation. There's lots of people that you could say are hip hop, but you don't see them on the mic, rapping.
The only difference between James Brown and Kirk Franklin is that James Brown might be the foundation of hip hop, where Kirk Franklin is not the foundation of hip hop, because hip hop built itself off of the James Brown's innovation and things of that nature. So that's a little different.
But wouldn't you say that Kirk Franklin, as much as James Brown was an innovator, Kirk Franklin is also an innovator
Very
in the
much
foundation of something very different that spun off of hip hop.
Very much
kind
so.
of the same way.
Yeah, I can see
the
that.
same way with like a reggaeton. It's reggaeton hip hop.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Hip hop has many streams that flow out of it.
Yeah.
And I think Kirk Franklin has taken that gospel music stream,
Okay.
and he's kind of a very formative pioneer, in that particular stream. That's just me.
Good conversation. Good conversation.
So basically, this whole idea of Love Theory is that at the end of the day, I think what people are really looking for, yearning for, is love. Very, very, very simple. And so I think all of us have a great need for that. A great need for love. And we start off, we're born into this world. We need that. And so this conversation of therapy, right? When we really talk about it, and break it down in its elementary, form, what are we talking about? There's a person that wants to talk, and there's a person that wants to listen. How simple is that? Just that within itself. Not even talking about the training of the person and all the It's just the simple fact. I have something that I desperately need to say. If I keep it bottled up, it impacts me in a negative way, in a painful way. Like it has an impact on every area of my life. I just need someone that will listen to me. And those that have been to great therapists, you find that the greatest of therapists are not sitting there solving your problems.
Not at all.
They create and facilitate an environment
For conversation.
for you to put the comparisons on the table. What's the lyric?
Yeah. So I can debate on my theories and share it, and a place to consolidate all my comparisons.
That's what they create, an environment for all that to happen, right? And so when we look at love, right? I mean, you know, from a biblical definition, love is patient, love is kind, all this stuff. This is all stuff that's expressed in a session, right? Now, I don't want to get into the details. Is real love, is agape. Now, the point is that there's patience there. There's kindness in the room. You know, there's no judgment in the room. All of the elements of the things that we would see. So what a person experiences in that moment is in many ways, not saying that it is love, but many of the elements of love, the things that we truly need as human beings, is present there because we so desperately need those environments in our lives. We need somebody to be patient with us. We need a place where there's kindness. You know, love keeps no record of wrongs. A therapist is not going to sit there and be like, look, you know, every time I talk to you, you say you do that, and, you know, but how about this? And, you know, you told me last week, and this is where you're bad, and this is where you're bad. You don't have therapy sessions like that.
Yeah.
It's a place where you're experiencing something that speaks to a deep need that we have as human beings.
Yeah. You know, those are strong words that are needed, you know, for us to really have this conversation about therapy and therapists and really advocating for them.
Yeah.
I would also like to have a strong conversation for us to be a people who actually genuinely care for the burdens of one another.
Yes.
You know, genuinely
Yeah.
have friends that, you know, just like we talked about at the beginning, that we have a check-in, you know,
Yeah.
not only on in this conversation today, right now, with this last hour, but we have conversation through text message, through phone calls, in a real sense. And I think that that's the part that I'm actually referring to as well, is like when you genuinely don't have people in your life.
Right.
And we genuinely have grown up in families where we haven't had families that genuinely support us in that same way. As I think it's really important for us to recognize that we've got to also learn from this conversation of going to somebody in a therapeutic sense, to recognizing that we should always be people who are therapeutic to one another.
Yeah.
One last hip hop bar before we close here today.
Let's go.
I'm not sure you've ever even heard this song before.
Oh, man.
And so I'm going to read the lyric and we can kind of talk through. You'll be excited once you know the artist, though.
Okay.
Yeah. So here we go. Sometimes a Xanny bar can help you fight back the anxiety. I go to my love quietly. Teardrops on our faces. Teardrops on my faces, like teardrops, become waterfalls by the time they reach my laces. That's a bar right there.
That's a bar. I'm not going to guess. You got to tell me, who is it?
That's Jay Electronica.
Electronica. Okay.
Jay
Wow,
Electronica.
yeah, I wasn't even, yeah, that's that guy.
Yeah.
That's that guy right there.
That's hip hop.
That's hip hop.
Now, when we talk about hip hop, you know, that's what I'm talking about. Like, that's a high level bar right
That's
there.
high level bar.
Yeah.
Jay
Sometimes a
Electronica.
Xanny bar can help you fight back the anxiety. I go to my love quietly. Teardrops on our faces, teardrops on my faces, like teardrops become waterfalls by the time they reach my laces.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So what's your thought on that bar? What's your thought on where you want to go with this one? You want to talk about Jay Electronica, or you want to go straight to the bar?
You can go to the bar, because Jay Electronica, I mean, once you start talking about it, I mean, the guy is just...
He's a legend. Yeah.
He is a legend. If you're a hip hop purist, he is an absolute legend.
Yeah.
I would say maybe one of the best to ever do it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Right.
And I think others would say the same.
Others will say the same too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as far as the lyric goes, I believe that there's an honesty in that.
Yeah.
Right. The fact that these teardrops. You know, this, you know.
But before you even get to here, I mean, I know you want to talk about the teardrops.
Go ahead.
But sometimes a Xanny bar can't help you fight back the anxiety.
Right.
You know, that speaks.
The self-medication.
Yeah, the self-medication.
Won't do it for you.
Won't do it for you. And
that's a good point.
You know, when we think about like the therapy, when we think about the pain that we have and the things that we go through, you know, just as I mentioned before, you know, growing up, there wasn't necessarily outlets like therapy for us to talk through and to deal with the issues that we find out. So we had to find our own self-outlets. And for, you know, some of those outlets for any of us in this room of conversation, if we can be honest, could be a medicated outlet.
It's true.
You know, and he's talking about a Xanny bar.
Yeah.
You know, and that's very, very interesting to go into this route where we recognize that there's always a pain that is within us. And how do you address the pain that is within you?
I think when we look at the drug situation, even in our country, that would be a helpful lens. I remember many years ago meeting a guy who basically told me that a particular drug that he used, street drug that he used, was what was available to help him through what he was going through. And he spent a lot of time, you know, expressing to me, you know, his issues with, you know, trying to get into the healthcare system and, you know, all the things that they would give him that wasn't really working for him and various other things. Now, you can look at a person like that and you can say, well, that's kind of questionable. But here's the question. How many people, when they get off work, they're stressed out, what do they go do? You know, happy hour, right? Take the edge off. We use comments like that because it doesn't sound so threatening. Well, what happens when your edge is too big for that? What happens when, you know, 2 beers won't do it? What happens when the edge is so big that you can't find anything to take the edge off? Mm-hmm. That you've tried everything. And the further you go, the more dangerous it becomes. But you can't find any safe or helpful way. You can't find, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. I'm saying you can't find it. Maybe because you don't have the relationships in your life to help introduce you to safe and effective ways. Maybe you don't have the healthcare. Maybe you don't have, you know, any of the elements, the relationships that would help you and show you safe ways to go about that. And you just begin to go into another direction, and then you find this thing. And then in your view, this is the only thing. When I do this thing, although it costs me everything, although it's broken my family, although it's the reason that I lost my job, although it has me out here on the streets, it's the only thing that takes the edge off. That's the reason that, like, when I was growing up, my mom, she used to always, like, get on me if I ever called someone a crackhead or was disrespectful, in her view, disrespectful to someone that was on drugs or someone that was on the street. Because she would always remind me that when that person was your age, do you think that they had plans of becoming that? Mm-hmm. She would remind me that many of us are only one tragedy away. It's by the grace of God that we're not there. So we need to look at those people, look at all of them through a very human lens and realize that we could be them.
Well,
maybe my edge is not their edge.
We're only one step away from being that individual. Mm-hmm. But I like for us to even look in the mirror and say, maybe we are that individual.
That's a good, great point.
Now, we might not have the same issue.
Yep.
And we might not have the same extent
Yeah.
and tragedy that you might see through the lens that you're looking at.
Right.
But the pain that you're going through as well could just be as much as traumatizing in your own life,
right.
But it might be a slow death. You know, it might be slow pain.
Very true.
You know, it might be the difficulty that of defining the difficulty just to make it through the day or through the moment or the pain that you're dealing with yourself on a consistent basis. It just looks different.
Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. I think that's a great point. I just find that sometimes the difference between people in one situation and another sometimes is the relationships in their life. You know, sometimes it's just as simple as what you were saying earlier. You were talking about us being able to be that for one another.
Yeah.
Sometimes the only thing that that person needed really was someone to listen.
So let me hit you with the bar, and I'm gonna ask you if you have one last word in our conversation today. Sometimes a Xanny bar can help you fight back the anxiety. I go to my love quietly, teardrops on our faces, teardrops on my faces, like teardrops become waterfalls by the time they reach my laces. You got a final word you want to share with us?
I would just say that I love the honesty of what Jay Electronica is laying down in that verse. And he has a platform. You listen to him. You know, we're listening to him. He has a platform. I think that we all need to find a space where we can be heard. You know, whatever that looks like in your life and whoever that is, some place where there's someone that can listen to you in a healthy way. And then I'm going to challenge us the other way, that we would be that space for others. Sometimes all people need is someone or a place where they can lay their verse. And maybe we can be that for someone else. So I want to, you know, feel challenged, you know, this week to make sure that I have this place in my life and make sure that when opportunity presents itself, that I can be this place for someone else.
Amen. My last word, this is the Rest Podcast. And I just wanted to share with us that our conversation today is just to encourage each and every one of us to find rest in God, and recognizing that the pain and the difficulties and the experiences that we all face every single day is not unique to our own individual experiences, but that we all face them actually the same way. But God provides us with rest, and he promises that those who actually come to him will actually find rest. And so I want to invite us all to learn how to come to God and rest and truly understand what it means to allow him to take the pain that we actually face every single day. He's given us many different opportunities and many different ways to actually experience his rest. And we'll continue to talk about that here every single time that we produce something. So I hope everybody enjoyed our conversation, and I hope we actually learn to rest in God every single day. Amen. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's content, click the like button and subscribe so that you can receive notifications for more of the recordings and information that we'll be sharing. We'd love for you to join us next time. So click that like button and subscribe to the rest.